Hello everyone, you might have guessed it from the title, but this is another one of those rambling videos in which I'm just talking to the camera. And yes, I have a guitar here, because who knows, maybe I have to demonstrate something. I don't know, because I didn't make a script, but I did of course have a topic. And the topic is, as is more often the case lately, fueled by comments on my YouTube channel and in my Discord. Actually, this is a stream. I'm streaming right now in my Discord and I will edit it later for YouTube, but there's also people in the chat that they can ask me questions. I can react to that. I want to kind of react to comments made on recent YouTube videos, and I collected them. And the first comment is about talent, but this is actually not the comment. There were many comments about this, because in one of those videos I talk about natural aptitude is kind of irrelevant for the way I teach. I don't address that. I just go into my methodology, which should work for most people that are interested in learning how to play, well, in this case, jazz guitar. So then many people will say, well, you're denying reality. What are you saying? Talent doesn't exist. And I have thoughts about that. First of all, I put a definition here, the definition I could find. It's natural aptitude or skill. So natural means like you just possess it. It's in you. You didn't really work for it at a certain time in your life. It just appears that you are good at it, or at least have the beginning of becoming good at a certain skill. And it might be genetics. It might be, I don't know what it is. And here we get to the problem of talent. Do I believe it exists? Well, certainly the word exists and the definition of the word. I asked AI about talent, and I asked them if there is scientific evidence for talent. And this is the answer I got. Well, it was a very long answer, but this was the summary. It says, scientific evidence suggests that talent in the form of natural aptitudes exists. I'm not sure based on what, but probably there are some studies. However, it's not solely determined by genetics. A combination of genetic predisposition, deliberate practice, and a supportive environment are all important factors in the development of talent. So they are all important. Well, as a teacher, or as somebody that writes methodology, this then of course is completely irrelevant. Why would I take that into account when I write a methodology? If I write methodology that's only meant for people that have a genetic predisposition, there's not much sense in that, right? Because first of all, not everyone that has a genetic predisposition for jazz guitar is interested in learning it. I don't even know how many people are genetically predispositioned. And that's a problem. Like, how do you know that? How do you know if you have talent? There's no way to know it. Most people that say, oh, he's talented, what they usually mean is, you are very good for your age. Mostly that's what they mean. Like, oh, they're young and they're very good. So that's talented. But they don't know anything about the history of this person. They don't know anything about these two components. How much did this person practice? What were their teachers or the teacher? What kind of methodology was the teacher using? And how good was the supportive environment? Maybe the parents were musicians, or they had lots of friends and family around that were good musicians, or maybe they were just very lucky and met a very good teacher at a young age. They don't know anything about that. And then another thing is, like, the people that say that, what is their prior knowledge of the subject they're talking about? What are your qualifications to make that judgment? And in many cases, when people were saying something about talent, I knew that the person they were talking about put in thousands of hours of practice. Let's say this exists, right? Let's say it's a real factor, the genetic predisposition. Let's say it's really very prevalent in your development as a musician. I think the more hours you put in, the less relevant it becomes. When somebody puts in 5,000 hours, how big is the part of talent that plays in the final result? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But here's my thing. For me, it's not a factor when I teach. And that's the most important thing. When I teach somebody something about jazz guitar, I don't take that into account. Again, that would be ridiculous, right? I don't even know exactly how that would be determined in the person. But also, if that is the starting point, then there's lots of people that I think are not talented. Again, who knows why I think that or how I make that determination, that I then wouldn't teach. That's ridiculous. I make a methodology that assumes a blank slate. Like a person that doesn't know anything about that subject. Well, it depends, of course, on which book you would get, or depends at which stage of your development you're at. For instance, my books assume you can already play guitar. It assumes you have a decent technique. Not a good technique per se, but a decent technique. You know how to put your fingers on the strings, you know how to attack a string with your pick and stuff like that. But there are also, of course, methods for people that cannot play guitar at all. And they assume a completely blank slate. For me, I just assume a blank slate when it comes to improvisation. And there's another thing with talent. Let's say somebody is supremely talented when it comes to understanding or hearing harmony. And this person comes to a jazz guitar lesson. But his technique or her technique is very bad to the extent that they cannot produce anything that sounds nice. No tone, the rhythm is gone. Like, how important is that talent for harmony really? I don't think it's important at all, because it starts with you being able to produce good notes. So if there's two people that come to my lesson, one is supremely talented in harmony. I discover that for some reason, I don't know how, maybe I play a recording and they immediately recognize everything that's being played. They can tell me all the chords and all the substitutions that are being used, let's say. And there's another person that cannot do any of that, but when they play, it sounds very good. Like they're playing like maybe some etude or something that they practiced, but it sounds very good, and I can tell the technique is flawless. And I can take only one as a student. I would take the technique person because I can work with that person. I could teach them harmony because it can be taught. The other person without technique, I have to teach technique, and I have no real interest in teaching technique. But also, that's much harder to learn. And it just requires a ton of work, right? If you are born with some kind of natural gift for harmony, you're not even used to working. So I prefer the person that I know put in a lot of hours to achieve something, because I know that is a good basis to build from. So again, do I believe in talent? It's a weird question. I believe people use the word. I believe people think they can recognize it. But I don't think, in most cases, the people that are saying stuff about talent actually know what they're talking about. They don't know enough about the topic itself that they believe people are talented in, and they don't know enough about what talent actually means to make that determination. Most people that I hear talk about talent are people that are not that great themselves. Right? They say, oh, he's very talented. I hear it very rarely from people that are experts in their craft. Now you might say, well, because they are talented. But let's say that's not the case. Let's say, even if you don't believe it's possible, there is this person that had to learn everything from the beginning, which is actually me. I had no talent in the sense that I had no natural aptitude for anything. I had to really work hard on technique. I had to really work hard on understanding music, harmony, rhythms, everything. And that's the reason also why I can explain it, because I know how I learned all of these things. And I practiced for thousands of hours. Let's say there's another person like that. I meet this person. When they talk about other great musicians, I never hear a person like that saying about anything about talent. They're talking about actual factual things like, okay, oh, yeah, I love the way they can play outside. I hear a lot of Herbie Hancock there, or, oh, I love his vibrato. It's very close to Django's. It's very precise in the determination of the skills. It's not this blanket statement like, oh, talented. That doesn't mean anything to me. Well, it probably means that you think this person is very good for their age or something. Not always. It can also be an older person, but then it also becomes less of a thing. It's less common to say about someone that's 65 to say talented. Less common. Why is that? It's because people then think, oh, but they had a lot of time to develop that skill. Well, there you go. It's about the time to develop that skill. And someone that's very young and very good might have also put in a lot of time. And a proof for that is the gap between the level of kids in, for example, China and the Netherlands. China, they're much stricter with this education of young musicians. Right? It's just a stricter culture. More is expected. It's tougher. Right? There's less consideration for the emotional It's dangerous to say that, but I mean, I've come from classical education, which was very strict, and I've seen a lot of my colleagues back then, well, we were 10, become very, well, maybe not very, but at least traumatized by that kind of teaching. And I understand that, but it did make us practice very hard, which yielded results. So in the end, it's what you think is important. Well, and in the Netherlands, to get back to the topic, this culture is not really there. It was there for me at the time. It was kind of an experiment. I don't think it no longer exists. But right now it's much more with care for the well-being of the child, which I think is a good thing, by the way. But it does create this difference in levels between different countries and the youth in different countries. Gian says, talking about talent is tricky, although some children have a rage to master, as Alan Winner has researched and described. And that I agree with, a rage to master. So how I define talent, even though that is not the real definition of talent, this is the real definition of talent, I think. But the way I define talent is the will to practice, the will to work. You have to be obsessed by this activity, this skill, whatever it may be. Maybe it's chess, maybe it's jazz, maybe it's ice skating, maybe it's Fortnite. I don't really care, because all of these activities require a lot of dedicated practice to get good at. Yes, this goes for all skills that have, I want to say competitive nature to it, but music doesn't, of course, necessarily have a competitive nature to it. But there is music competitions, and there's a lot of competition between students when they are learning the skill. So when that is introduced, this competitiveness, or can I get better than the other person, then the will to work is very important. Right? It's not so much the case with trying to think of a skill that doesn't have competitiveness in it. Let's say something like reading a book or traveling. I think that's another activity that necessarily doesn't require the will to work. Let's say there's two kinds of hobbies when you think of it. There's these hobbies that require this will to work to actually have fun at it, because you need to become good at it. And then there's the hobbies that are very passive, like reading. You can become better at reading, but it's not necessary. You can always find books that are at your level, and nobody would say, well, he's not a good reader. Right? Maybe in school, but like as an adult, that doesn't really happen. Same with traveling. Lots of people say traveling is a hobby, which is probably a great hobby, but doesn't really require you to work at it to become good at it. Not saying that you couldn't become good at traveling. I'm sure you could, but it's not necessary to have fun with the activity. Okay, let's go to the next question. I was talking a lot about my method for learning jazz, and I always talk about transcribing great players and then learning phrases from their solos and applying them yourself, getting creative with them, maybe making some changes. But first of all, just applying the phrase yourself. Like you have a great 2-5-1 phrase or 2-5-1 lick, and you just try it out yourself. And that's the way I teach jazz. That's what my books are about. That's why my books have different topics, right? There's a 30s Django book. The book is filled with phrases, licks that Django played in the 30s. The only thing I did to add to that is, well, I wrote them down, but I organized them, I codified them, I put them in exercises that you can do. I made videos showing you how to use them. But the vocabulary itself is from Django. And then there's a bebop book, which is all bebop vocabulary from great bebop players. And then there's a post-bop book. And now I'm working on a book about Django in the 40s and 50s. And then somebody commented that Jimmy Bruno, of course, a very famous jazz guitar player, in his recent post doesn't like the premise just using licks to play jazz. I was trying to find the post, but it's not on his YouTube channel. But here we get into the difference between teaching, my methodology, and playing. So when I talk about teaching, I'm talking about teaching. I'm talking about my method of teaching jazz. I'm not necessarily talking about playing. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with playing jazz and only playing good phrases. And if you can connect them really well, it will sound good because all the licks are good, right? Your timing is good, the licks are good, you're able to connect them, which is a lot of work, by the way. It's not automatic. Then you are in my estimation, a great player. In fact, it's probably very hard to say, oh, lick, 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 lick. Because in the end, and that's very important to understand, everything you play, you could call a lick. Even if you made it up on the spot, and I transcribed the 4 bars, oh, it's a great lick. Even if you didn't experience it as a lick, it could still be a lick. And here we get to this point. When I play jazz, I don't think like that. I don't think, let's play a lick and let's do another lick. No, I'm thinking about the tune I'm playing and the progression, and I'm trying to think about meta concepts like, okay, maybe try to not repeat myself, maybe I should put some rests, maybe it's time for some triplets, how about my timing, maybe it's time for some chords, because all of this vocabulary that I'm playing is automatic. I don't have to think about that because I practice it so hard, and I practice the connections or trying to come up with variations so much by repeating it all the time that this is automatic. Now, I could think about it. I could say, okay, you know what? Let's try to play something original. I could do that. Sometimes I do that. And can be nice. Sometimes I also play something that is not so nice. But for me, it's much more important to think about the other stuff. Like, okay, how do I start my solo? How do I end my solo? I need to build to some kind of climax. Maybe it's time for some chords, right? All of these decisions are much more important for me than the actual vocabulary I'm playing, because that is something I practice at home. So yeah, when I play jazz, I don't use this premise. It's only for teaching. So I want to make that clear. So I understand what Jim Bruno is saying, but he also might say this in the context of teaching. That's fine. He has another way to teach. But when we play, I'm kind of thinking I'm guessing we're thinking of the same thing. We're thinking about the music itself. We're thinking about the other people, about the audience, about the order of the tunes. We're having the same things. But how we get the vocabulary, how we practice the vocabulary might be different. But when we play jazz, probably very similar. Hey, Fabian, you just finished work? Great. Good. Then you have time to watch the stream. Ask me some challenging questions. Okay. So I don't think this is necessarily a disagreement with my views. It might be though, right? Maybe he doesn't agree with the way I teach jazz, which would not be a surprise to me because many people disagree with it. Okay. This is a comment on a recent video in which I talked about like this framework of building vocabulary, and I made this comment like, you only need 21 phrases in principle to be able to be a fluent jazz improviser. I will put a link to that video in the description. And I talked about my way to get there by practicing phrases, all that stuff. And then this comment is, this is getting out of hand. How frustrated one must be to try to confine music into a kind of rigid universe. Once all chaos and freedom to sound bad is firmly poured into concrete, where do you go? Santana said, the slower you play, the more the tones are yours. Hit the chord and with eyes closed, put a finger somewhere on the fretboard and listen, if you have ears to spare. Kind of philosophical. I think the point here is that I seem to only focus on having this perfect vocabulary that you should apply in all circumstances, and there's no room left for your own personality or for like space, maybe for your own creativity. So first of all, I think also again, this conflates my teaching methodology with my playing. Because I'm not saying those are the same things. Even though when I'm in a video and I demonstrate things, you might think that, but I'm still teaching there. So that's the first thing I want to say. So I'm not frustrated at all. Well, not more than other musicians, I think. So I'm not stuck in a kind of rigid universe. In fact, that's a very weird thing to say about me, because I dare you to find someone else that has played more instruments in more different styles, in more different ensembles than me. Because I've played so many kinds of music on so many different instruments that it is kind of ridiculous at this point. So I'm not rigid, and I like also lots of music, right? That's another thing about being rigid in music is when you only like this one thing, and that's not the case for me. Like I can enjoy a great classical concert, but I can also enjoy a great bluegrass concert. And even within classical, I'm not only like I want to only hear Baroque or I only want to hear this kind of. I'm very very broad in my music taste. But I'm not. I'm kind of rigid when I teach. That I agree with, but it's not out of frustration. It's because I'm trying to make a very clear methodology that anyone, in principle, can understand and follow. It doesn't require you to be an expert at anything except for that you already have to be able to play some guitar, right? But I don't require you to be an expert at harmony, at timing. I don't require any ear skills because that's the same thing. This question here, do you believe in talent, could have also be, do I believe in ear training? Because no, I don't believe in that. Because if having great ears, according to the definition of ear training, right, where you can kind of magically hear all kind of chords and you can sing your lines. If that's a requirement for you to follow my methodology, then I would exclude a lot of people because most people that I've met have bad ears, according to the definition, including the people that you think have good ears, have bad ears, right? According to that definition. Because most people that I've met are not able to actually hear a tune and then figure out the chords on the fly. It's very rare. And even worse when it's little melodies. Like when I play a melody that's very difficult to copy for most people, including very good musicians. So that's a whole other conversation. But in fact, here's the thing. The people that have very good ears are usually not the best players. Because again, it's kind of blocks your will to work or something, right? Because you have such good ears that you can rely on that. But then you get outplayed by someone that's just working on the vocabulary and working on the technique. So maybe being talented and having good ears is a disadvantage. Who knows? But let's address this. Carlos Santana said, the slower you play, the more the tones are yours. Hit a chord and with eyes closed, put a finger somewhere on the fretboard and listen if you have ears to spare. Well, first of all, Carlos Santana was playing a different kind of music. And if you play any Carlos Santana solo and then any solo by Django or any of the contemporary players like Stochelo or Adrien, you will immediately hear the difference. But I am working with the facts on the ground, as they say. Hopefully that's how you say it. I'm working with the premise that you go to Fontainebleau, the big festival, and you want to join a jam. Because that is, in fact, the goal of most people. And it doesn't have to necessarily be Fontainebleau, but it could be just a local jam, a good quality jam. You want to be able to sit down and play with those guys. Usually it's guys, but with those people. What is required of you to do that? Well, you are required to know the tunes. So that's, I always say, like 20, 30 tunes. You are required to be able to play rhythm with a steady groove. And when you are a solo player, you are required to play good sounding swinging solos. And my only goal with my methodology is to get you there as fast as possible. And I do that according to my definition of getting there. Right? The there for me is that you can play flowing eighth note lines, flowing, swinging eighth note lines that outline the harmony of a chosen tune in some way. I call that the winning condition. I treat learning jazz as a game. It has nothing to do with jazz itself. It's just the way I teach. Again, it's not about the way you should experience jazz or improvisation or how I experience it, but I treat the learning of the skill as a game, and the winning condition of the game, so when you have won the game, is when you can outline the harmony of a chosen tune in some way. Right? It could be a beboppy way, a bluesy way, a Django way, with flowing eighth note lines. Because eighth notes are what is played in jazz most. So then you've won the game. And after that, your job is to get better at winning the game. My methodology is pointed towards that winning condition, to get you there as fast as possible. And I do that in the way that I think would work best. So it doesn't talk at all about musicality, uniqueness, artistry, any of those very deep considerations. It only talks about the skills that you need to build to get there, to get to the winning condition. So of course, when you watch a video about me talking about the methodology, it's me talking in that way. It doesn't mean anything in the greater context of what music is, how to experience music, how to perform music. Because my view is that once you get there to the point that you can jam with anyone, then you have a very good starting point to actually work on all the other stuff that you want to work on, if you want to work on it. Maybe you want to work on your ballad playing, or you want to work on your outside playing, or you want to work on your lyrical playing. You want to work on all kinds of things you could think of that are valuable to be an artist, to be a unique voice. But that's after you've got there. And my methodology doesn't address that at all. It doesn't address that. It only addresses building vocabulary for you to be able to sit. So yeah, once you got there, then I say, yeah, go hit the chord and with your eyes closed, put a finger somewhere on the fretboard and listen. But if that's the only thing you can do, I promise you, you will not have a good time at the jam session, and you will be... People won't have a good time with you even, like at the jam session. The people that do this and cannot really play, they are what people call jam killers. And now you might say, well, I don't really care about any of that, right? I just want to have a good time at home. Well, that's fine. But my methodology, even though it could work for someone like that, is really meant for the people that want to go to Fontainebleau or Django Fest Northwest or Django in June or any of those festivals, want to sit down and just sound good. That's it. Very practical. And I don't say anything about artistry. I don't even have an opinion on that. If you want to do that, then you should do it. But it's not my methodology. It doesn't address that at all. Okay? I do not play licks. I play music. It's another comment. I do not play licks. I play music. I don't care to sound like some players. What I like is to search ways to make hot solos with a minimum amount of knowledge and prepared lines. But I try to make it sound interesting and acceptable to the common listener, and most of all transmit a feeling of emotion and freshness. Well, again, that is perfectly valid, but let's go point by point. I do not play licks, I play music. Well, that's just semantics, because, again, if we talk about jazz, you could take any phrase of any player and call it a lick. Or you don't call it a lick, you call it a phrase, or you call it an idea or concept. Doesn't matter. That's just semantics. So this is not something that is disagreeing with the way I teach or play jazz. This is just semantics. Doesn't like the word licks, and I understand that. Many people have told me that. That's why in my books I always use the word phrases. Just to be a little bit less offensive when it comes to that. I have to be honest, in my head I always think about the word lick. I like actually that word. So, yeah. I don't care to sound like some players, but I like to search ways to make hot solos. Okay, but that's I also search ways to make hot solos. My way is just to study vocabulary of other great players. That doesn't mean that I want to sound like them. Because this is a common misconception, that what I'm trying to do is sound like another player. If you watch me play in videos, I actually do not sound like anyone specifically. Because I have so many sources that I will sound like a combination of those players, add into that my own variations on things, or things I come up with myself, and what I will end up sounding like is myself, actually. So I think this is a misconception that my methodology will lead to this place. And I've said it many more times on my channel before, but here's another thing to think about. It happened to me recently. I also said it 3 videos ago. I was showing someone that is just getting started with solo playing some vocabulary, some basic vocabulary. They asked me for that. I said, could you show me some basic things? And I showed them some basic shapes that I learned from Stoffel Rosenberg. He didn't teach me, but I learned it through transcription. And this person that I was teaching, very musical person, also knowledgeable about the music, just was only playing rhythm until then, just getting started with soloing. recognized the vocabulary. He said, well, this is very Stochelo-like, and I'm afraid I will end up sounding like Stochelo. And then I said, what I always say, because it's not the first time that somebody said it to me. Like, first of all, you're never going to sound like Stochelo, right? Because there's only one Stochelo, and there's much more to sounding like Stochelo than just knowing his vocabulary. It's the whole touch and the vibrato and just the creativity with which he can play all of those lines. But even, let's say you get close to sounding like Stochelo, like people hear it saying, oh yeah, I can hear Stochelo in that. Let's say you get there, which would already be very difficult. But I know people who've gotten there. Let's say I play a recording on my phone. I play a track. I recorded that myself at a gig or something. It's somebody that sounds a lot like Stochelo. Then I say, well, but it's you, because I recorded you 2 weeks ago at the gig. I think if you would hear that right now, I'm talking to the person that cannot play like that at all yet, right? So they have to imagine themselves in the future. If you would hear that, you'd be very happy. Why? Because, well, first of all, you sound good. Second of all, you have a great technique, and you already can play probably any tune with a good solo. So that's a great starting point to then go other directions. So I don't knock sounding like another great player. I mean, I wish I would sound like Django, for instance. If somebody would hear me play and say, oh, is it Django or is it Christiaan? That would be a great compliment for me. I wouldn't be offended by that at all. So don't care to sound like, I don't care either. It's not, or care is maybe the wrong word. It's not my goal, but if it happens then I wouldn't mind. It's just, that's a great starting point to maybe then go another direction. It says, ways to make hot solo with a minimum amount of knowledge and prepared lines. Those are two different things, right? Minimum amount of knowledge, I think, refers to not being a theoretical player, and I would agree with that. I think if you are stuck in your own head thinking about theoretical concepts, that could be a problem, but not necessarily, because I know people that have that play great. So, but I understand that goal. And prepared lines, I also understand that goal. But here's the thing. Again, this confuses my teaching with my playing, because when I play, I don't play prepared lines. It's all automatic when I play. I don't have to think about any of it. It's automatic. I just know how to play. It's no different from other jazz players, I think. But try to make it sound interesting, which I also try to do, and acceptable to the common listener. That's difficult because, I don't know, there's many common listener. There could be lots of different opinions there. But let's say it sounds good according to certain aesthetics that jazz has, like timing, swinging timing, and follow the changes, stuff like that. And most of all, transmit a feeling of emotion and freshness. Yeah, and I agree with all of that. But again, this is not addressed in my methodology because I don't care about any of that. I just care about you being able to sit down at a jam session and sound in the style, okay, and then you could start thinking about transmitting feelings, emotion, freshness. It's all for later. But I do not disagree with this comment, right? It just confuses what I'm talking about when I'm talking about teaching. I'm never talking there about actually playing jazz. And my whole channel is about teaching, not so much about playing. Although they are related, of course. But I do understand that when you play jazz, there might be lots of other considerations. I didn't play at all. But let's play something. And I have a backing track here of After You've Gone. And so now that you know that when I play it's automatic, I'm going to try to make that very obviously clear by not even caring what I play, but it's going to be very automatic. Not putting any effort. I'm just going to play this song. So I don't really care about the quality of the solo. I only care that it's flowing eighth note lines that outline the changes in some way. I play a little bit the theme to get the song in our head. Right, that's all automatic. Like I don't have to think about these lines at all. And I try to be very distant, but it's difficult because I get involved with it anyway, right? But let's do it again. And now I try to be a little bit more involved with it. So make some kind of meta decisions about, okay, it needs some of this, needs some of that. But actually it also already happens automatically a little bit because I really cannot shut it off. But let's try to be more deliberate. It's difficult to fake these things, you know, to be to do it different. Too much effort. That's it for this YouTube video. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe in the next video, who knows, I might react to a comment that you're making. I welcome the criticism, which reminds me, someone said in a comment, could you be wrong? It was funny because literally in that video I say I could be wrong. And definitely I could be wrong. That's why I welcome the criticism, because it makes me think more about my teaching methodology again, talking about teaching. Even though if I think I'm not wrong, it makes me think of another way to explain or to clarify what I think about certain things, my views, so to say. So please leave a comment if you feel like you want to say something about it. Could also be positive. People always ask me like, why are you only talking about the negative comments? Well, the positive comments, of course, I welcome them even more, probably. But, there's not really a good topic for a YouTube video to just read a comment that says, I agree with you. That doesn't make for good content. Hopefully, I will see you in the next video. Bye.